Greetings! This video accompanies the impending crisis unit in History 121. In this video, we will discuss the most controversial and dysfunctional election of the 19th century, the presidential election of 1860. So, let's start with the Republicans. At their convention in the Wigwam in Chicago, the Republicans denounced both the Dred Scott decision and John Brown's raid. They opposed the expansion of slavery in the territories. And after much politicking, they nominated President Abraham Lincoln for president. All of Lincoln's lawyer friends from the Illinois circuit rides worked delegates on Lincoln's behalf. In fact, Lincoln's campaign manager, David Davis, was a circuit judge in Illinois, and later one of Lincoln's appointees to the Supreme Court. For the nomination, Lincoln defeated what would later be called a, quote, team of rivals, unquote. William Seward from New York, Salmon P. Chase from Ohio, Edward Bates from Missouri, and Simon Cameron from Pennsylvania. All of these men would serve in Lincoln's cabinet at some point. The GOP chose Lincoln because he was a moderate who appealed to abolitionists. He seemed less threatening than abolitionist Seward or Chase. A side note here about the Wigwam. It was nothing more than a hastily constructed wooden arena. After the Republican National Convention of 1860, it was destroyed. The Democrats. At their convention in Charleston, South Carolina, the Democrats split by section. Supporters for Stephen Douglas reaffirmed the idea of congressional non-interference with slavery. Southerners, who had the upper hand, wanted the federal protection of slavery. After James Buchanan failed to receive the nomination, the delegates from Alabama walked out, and the convention adjourned without a candidate. The Northern Democrats reassembled in Baltimore and nominated Stephen Douglas. Likewise, the Southern Democrats also reassembled in Baltimore and nominated Vice President John Breckinridge of Kentucky. They also adopted the Slave Code platform. A third party was in this race, the Congressional Union Party. This party was composed of the die-hard Southern Whigs who supported both the Union and the Constitution. They nominated John Bell of Tennessee for president, but he was not their first choice. That honor went to Sam Houston, but Houston was not interested. In fact, Houston wanted out of Washington so badly that he came back to Texas and was elected governor. The campaign. The race for the top office in the land turned into two sectional races, Lincoln versus Douglas in the north, and Bell versus Breckinridge in the south. Lincoln did not appear on any ballots in the south. Bell and Breckinridge did not appear on any ballots in the north. For his part, Douglas tried to campaign in the South in an effort to unite the Democrats. You might recall he's the only one who had both North and South followers. This effort failed. Lincoln won the fragmented election by winning most of the northern states. Breckinridge won most of the southern states, but did not receive enough votes in the Electoral College. Douglas received 12 Electoral College votes and won 2 states, 1 free, 1 slave. Because of the charged political atmosphere, the two moderate candidates of the campaign, Douglas and Bell, lost to the more radical candidates of the campaign, Lincoln and Breckinridge. Like the Whigs before them, the Democrats have also split into sectional groups. Finally, with Lincoln's victory, Southerners have lost their power in the White House. The last president before Lincoln to not have pro-Southern views was John Quincy Adams. The aftermath. After Lincoln's election, a determined minority acted quickly in an emotionally charged climate and carried out its program against the confused and indecisive opposition. During the Lincoln interregnum, the period between Lincoln's election and his inauguration, 7 states seceded from the United States. South Carolina passed its secession ordinance on December 20th, 1860. 6 more states seceded by February 1st, 1861. Mississippi on January 9th, Florida on January 10th, Alabama on January 11th, Georgia on January 21st, Louisiana on January 26th, and Texas on February 1st. To secede, Texas called a special convention because Governor Sam Houston refused to sign the secession petition. Secessionist forces triumphed, and Texas entered the Confederate States of America on March 2nd. Then they evicted Houston from his office on March 16th because Houston refused to take an oath of loyalty to the Confederate States of America. All this proved is that Sam Houston remained a Jacksonian who valued the Union over states' rights to the bitter end. On February 7, 1861, delegates from the 7 seceded states met in Montgomery, Alabama, and wrote a new constitution. The Csa Constitution looked like the USA Constitution, except that slavery was written into the document, and the president received 1 6-year term with no opportunity to run for re-election. The convention selected Jefferson Davis for president and Alexander Hamilton Stevens of Georgia for vice president. Davis was a Democrat from Mississippi. Stevens was a Whig from Georgia. I've included their USA political party affiliations here to demonstrate that there is little harmony in the Confederate White House for the years it existed. Meanwhile, in Washington, James Buchanan now had to decide on his issue of secession. After receiving the news of Southern secession and organization into a rival nation, President James Buchanan decided to do nothing. Yes, I said it, nothing. He said secession was illegal, but that he, as President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States, lacked the authority to coerce a state back into the Union. Where, oh where, is Andrew Jackson when you need him and his Force Act? Buchanan said he could enforce the law on individuals, but not states. Thus, he did nothing when the Confederate government officials grabbed federal strongholds in the South, including forts in Texas that lined Indian Territory and Forts Phillips and Jackson south of New Orleans. Meanwhile, Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, resisted Confederate takeover attempts. Instead, Commander Robert Anderson asked Washington for supplies. Buchanan sent a steamship to reinforce the fort, but Confederate forces fired on the steamer. The steamer returned to Virginia without accomplishing its mission. And in case you're wondering, this is an act of war, what the Confederates did to this steamer. Meanwhile, in Washington, Senator John Crittenden of Kentucky tried to be Henry Clay by proposing a compromise. Never mind that the compromises that held the nation together up to this point had all failed. On December 18, 1860, Crittenden proposed 2 bills in an effort to save the Union that provided concessions to the South. The first bill allowed slavery in all territories south of the 3630 line, the old Missouri Compromise line. The second bill guaranteed slavery where it already existed. Neither bill had support in either chamber of Congress, as Southern congressmen seceded from the Union, along with their state. Crittenden then sponsored a February peace conference that proposed to amend the Constitution by protecting slavery where it already existed. Had this proposal been ratified, it would have been the 13th Amendment. However, despite getting through Congress, it failed to get ratification from the states. Thus, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, ratified in December 1865, does not protect slavery, but abolishes it instead. On March 4th, 1861, two questions dominate the national stage. First, how far will President Abraham Lincoln go to preserve the Union? Second, how far would Southerners go to protect the peculiar institution known as slavery? According to historian James McGregor Burns, this is the only time that American democracy failed, as the white male voters in seven southern states decided they would rather fight than allow Abraham Lincoln and the new Republican Party to govern them. Thank you for watching this video on the 1860 presidential election and its aftermath, and as always, may the force be with you.